Tonight, I'm presenting to you the Canaanite woman, and this story is a little bit tough, especially when you read through it and you don't have a lot of context behind the story. But it's actually quite a beautiful story about a woman humbling herself and being persistent and reaching for Jesus in great faith against cultural barriers, ethnic barriers. Like Scott said, she's a Canaanite, she's a Gentile woman. So it really reveals how merciful God is, how merciful Jesus is, and really how humble and persistent and faithful she was in an effort to save her daughter, who was demon possessed in this story. So it's a real story of faith and persistence and just humility. Like Scott said also, it's taken place in the region of Tyre and Sidon, which is a Gentile territory. It's outside of, at the time that Jesus was there, it's outside of Israel. So it's funny because at one point in the story, obviously the woman approaches him. Many people recognize Jesus, so he got famous very quickly. Outside of his home turf where he was comfortable moving around. And he got renowned throughout all these areas. And we've mentioned other areas that he's been approached or that he's had miracles along the way that were in Gentile territories. So the news of Jesus at this point is spreading far and wide. And everybody, people outside of Israel, want a piece of what he has to offer. So it's already being spread. Another unique thing in this story is that she calls him the son of David, even though she's a Canaanite woman. It's very unique. The book of Matthew mentions that. Mark's version does not. That she references him this way when she's considered an outsider, religiously and ethnically and culturally. So we'll see that the difficulties she's facing are distance. She's an outsider. Delay. Jesus is silent. I believe Matthew shows this silence from him initially, and her discomfort. And really that comes from, it sounds like a harsh statement from him, or almost even a rebuke from him. But she's persistent. And we'll see in the story how her persistence does pay off. So we're going to start with Mark tonight, out of the CSB. And sorry, before we start, I did want to point out to you that he was in Mark 6. He was down here in Gennesaret. You can see on the map, this is where Jesus is from, Nazareth over here. And he spent a lot of his time in Capernaum in the Sea of Galilee area over here. Bethsaida is where he got his first 4 disciples over here. So he's very familiar with this whole region. So he's in Gennesaret, and this is where our story picks up, he decides he's going to go over to Tyre and Sidon. And from there, Jesus, arose and went away to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And he entered a house and did not want anyone to know, yet he could not be hidden. So he clearly wanted to keep a low profile. And you see this several times in stories when it comes to Jesus. And he gets overwhelmed even outside of his main territory, where you would think he would be pretty safe from crowds, or safer, because if he's normally around here, going to Jerusalem a few times, you'd think he'd be pretty far away and maybe be able to be hidden like he wants to be, right? But he couldn't be. He was too famous for that already. But immediately a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit, which in other translations does refer to it as a demon as well, demon possession, heard of him and came and fell down at his feet. This highlights her urgency. She found out about Jesus and immediately came to him and just collapsed, knelt down, fell down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she begged, pleaded, repeatedly asked him to cast the demon out of her daughter. And the reason why I emphasize this begged, pleaded, repeatedly asked, because that's a main theme here. Her persistence. She is a very persistent woman. She has a problem with her daughter, and she doesn't want to take no for an answer. She is begging. She is doing whatever she has to do. She's falling down at his feet. She runs over to him as fast as she probably hears about him, because she knows he's the man who is known to be able to get rid of this affliction with her daughter. And he said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." Now, like I said, I know this is hard language, but it's really speaking to Jesus' mission. His mission, he clearly states his mission in other areas. His mission is to go to the children of Israel first. The children here, the children to be fed first, that's Israel. And the dogs, even though it sounds harsh, are the Gentiles. And the children's bread, that's his mission. That's his ministry. That's the word of God. That's him teaching. His gift is to the children of Israel first. He needs to bring faith to the children of Israel before he throws these blessings to the Gentiles. And it's very important that he says first, because he doesn't say no. He'd never said no. And even as harsh as it sounds, you never see him say no when he says this to her. He just says first. He says, "Let the children of Israel come first." But listen to her response. This is a response of faith, but also a mother's deep, undying affection that would do just anything for her daughter to be saved from the affliction that is absolutely cursing her. She answered him and said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." She's saying, yes, I know they get your blessings. I know they get your miracles. I know they get your favor. I know they get your word first. I know that, Lord. But you have so much. There's some for us there too. I just want a little piece of it. I just want a crumb. Anybody that's ever owned a dog knows exactly how this analogy goes. I have 3 dogs. They will sit there and act like you lit their world up just by giving them a teeny tiny piece of whatever steak or whatever you're eating. And sometimes they don't even know that it's not good, like broccoli or something. They just want you to share it, and that's all she wants. She just wants him to share just a morsel of what he's offering them in order to save her daughter. So she accepts that Israel is the chosen people. She is accepting that, but she's also believing in him. And he said to her, "For this statement, you may go your way. The demon has left your daughter." So he says, just because of what you said, just because of your response to me, it's just a spoken, what was that, one sentence? One sentence answer to him. For that, you may go your way. The demon has left your daughter. Just like that. All that begging, all that pleading, all that persistence, all those nights and hardships she faced with that curse on her daughter. And deliverance happened just by his authority, just by his word, immediately. Her statement of faith revealed her understanding of Christ's mission, and his salvation revealed his mercy. He was still willing to go off of his set mission, the one he had just stated to her, and heal her daughter because of her faith, because of her understanding, and because of his mercy. And then Mark closes out this section saying, "And she went home and found the child laying in bed, and the demon had gone. So he just gives us confirmation there that there is peace again in this woman's life, that it did work out. The other translation, the other author that has this story is Matthew. And in Matthew, it's very similar. He does have a few differences, and I'll share those with you at the end here, but very similar story. And Jesus went away from there and withdrew to the district of Tyre and Sidon. Notice in here, it doesn't say he was trying to stay hidden. It doesn't say he was trying to stay hidden and he could not. It skips that part. And it goes right to, and behold, a Canaanite. Now, Mark called her a Syrophoenician woman, a Gentile, but Matthew, he's speaking more to the Jews in his writing, and he wants to point out that she's not just any Gentile. She's an enemy or a former enemy, one of the old enemies of Israel. She's one of the people that God told Israel to destroy as part of taking that territory, right? So Matthew wants to make a point of making sure we understand this woman and her background and who she is to the Jewish people in saying this. And behold, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and was crying, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David. My daughter is severely oppressed by a demon." So this is different language too. The first part is, "Have mercy on me." So here she's saying, help me. Please help me. It's my daughter who's afflicted, but I'm afflicted because she's afflicted. Have mercy on me, Lord, help me. And then she calls him Son of David. In both versions, she calls him Lord, but in this one, she also calls him Son of David. And that's particularly relevant to Matthew, again, because he's writing to the Jews, and this is significant to the Jewish people. This has meaning to them. Calling him the Son of David means something to Jewish readers here. But he did not answer her a word. This is also different. In Mark, he does not point out this silence from Jesus and this whole sentence. And his disciples came and begged him, saying, "Send her away, for she is crying out after us." So Jesus is quiet. He doesn't respond at first. So his disciples decide to intervene and say, "Send her away." And I think it's important to say, silence isn't always bad. It's just a test of faith. We face silence so many times from God sometimes and wonder why. But he has his reasons, and he wants to test us. He wants to build our faith. And he does that through so many ways. He wants to see what we're made of. He wants to see our faith. And it also is kind of a test of the disciples and her reaction to being kind of rebuked by them and him alike, right? They really misunderstood Jesus' silence here. And they're going to see that in his response. He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." So he's much more direct here in Matthew, saying this is for the children of Israel, and saying instead of doing an analogy with the children and the bread and the dogs. But he does on the next line say, she does say, "But she came and knelt before him, saying, 'Lord, help me.'" So he's pointing out, hey, I am for Israel. But she's saying, "Lord, help me." Not help my daughter, help me. Again, she is taking this upon herself. And this is where you get the analogy that Mark gave us. And he answered, "It is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." But she said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." So again, Matthew is just saying, showing this complete persistence and humility on her part. She's humbling herself on her daughter's behalf, but she makes it her own problem. She's so consumed with the problem and heartbroken and upset that it is now her. She needs his mercy just as much as her daughter does. She needs this to happen. And she's begging and humbling herself and doing whatever she can. And, his silence, it wasn't denial, right? It was just his timing, because he answers her, "O woman, great is your faith. Be it done for you as you desire." And her daughter was healed instantly. Could you imagine having Jesus say that to you? Great is your faith. It's amazing. He says this to a Gentile, Syrophoenician, Canaanite woman that had no business in his plan as of yet, according to what his mission statement was. And he saw her humility. He saw her persistence. He saw her faith. And he said, that makes this for you also. And he gave her what she most desired, which was his mercy on her daughter, and by virtue of that, her as well. It's just a shining example of her humility in all of this, and boldness and persistence. She wouldn't give up. She had to have this, and she saw her opportunity, and she believed. She believed so much that Jesus had mercy on her as a result. As I said, there are some differences, mostly in the fact that Matthew is writing to the Jewish people, which I mentioned. He mentions the son of David. He specifies the disciples' reactions, which we don't get from Mark. He specifies her great faith. In Mark, he just says statement. Your statement was what he commended there, instead of faith. And then Matthew points out the silence that wasn't denial. It was just a waiting period. It was a test of her faith. It was a test of her commitment. And Matthew also calls her Canaanite, which is clearly meant to be an allusion to being an enemy of the Jews, or a former enemy of the Jews. Mark also mentions the secrecy, that he could not be hidden, speaking to his fame and throughout the land that spread far beyond Israel at that point. So in summary, I will say there are 4 big points to remember about this. Bring your real needs to Jesus. Bring them. You don't have to bring them. You don't have to clean yourself up. Bring them as you are. Beg him. Intercede for the people you love. Ask him to have mercy on you. And don't quit. Don't quit in the silence. Don't quit when you feel like he is not answering you. Delay can feel terrible, especially when it feels so urgent. Mark pointed out the urgency that she had to get there immediately when she saw Jesus. And then Matthew pointed out the delay. And that delay was not denial. And we have to remember that in our own prayer lives. It's not a denial. We need to be persistent. And we need to be humble and bold together. We're not entitled, but God wants us to go to him. He wants us to approach him for mercy. And finally, we have to remember that this was an instance of boundary crossing. Matthew especially wanted to point that out to us, that this was something that was not expected of Jesus, that most Jews would have expected him not to do. And you see that in his disciples' reaction too. So, and they misunderstood his silence as wanting to push her away. But we have to remember in our lives that there are people that we probably think should be pushed away and aren't for the church or for God. And we have to ask ourselves the same question and find out if we're acting like the disciples or if we're going to act like Jesus.
Excellent.
Thank you.